Okay. Rabbi said today we will be learning Daf Yud Zayin. The first thing I'd like to say today is that for the next 2 weeks approximately, because it's Erev Pesach and Chol Hamoed, and I'll also be traveling in the middle. So all that together, that means that the next time that the share will be on a regular basis will be the first Tuesday after Pesach. So the first Tuesday after Pesach will be the regular share. But we will start according to where the schedule is for the Omid Yomi. I'm saying it now because not just the people who attend the share, but also those who listen by on Kanawashin or the YouTube. I'm not sure exactly all the different ways where people listen. So their show should be aware of it, that we will not be posting regularly for the next almost 2 weeks, because I'll only be giving the share. The next time I'll be giving the share like to a group of people on the regular time, which is at 9 o'clock, will be the first Tuesday after Pesach. But
so that's 2 weeks from today, right?
Beg pardon?
2 weeks from today.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today we will start. Yeah, the Tuesday, 2 weeks from today, we will. 2 weeks from today, we will start that share on that Tuesday. Yeah, we'll have the share. In the interim, we will, when we start on the 2 weeks Tuesday, we will start on the Omid, which is the appropriate Omid for that day, according to the law. What I will try and do is that during Chol Hamoed, I'm not sure exactly what times, I will try and post. I can't commit myself anyway to a particular time. I will try and post it so it will be available in all the different means. I'll try and post not all the shiurim, at least 50%. 50% of the shiurim I'll try and post. That means I'll cover at least 50% of the amudim of which we're supposed to cover, and I'll cover it sometime during Chol Hamoed and send it to Reb Zalman, who will post it on all the various means. So there will be Chol Hamoed available, some recordings of us progressing further. The few amudim which will be left over, which we have not done, so then I will do them on top of the regular share. I'll also add the missing amudim, like each day another amud, till we finish off the missing amudim. So and that's how I think we'll progress with that. I hope that is clear. The other thing I need to mention is that yesterday there was quite a number of errors in the share, and so therefore I'm just going to today go over part of the Mishnah on Daf Zayin base and go for the Gemara, which we're supposed to do today. And the Mitzvah, I think what I'll do is I will make another recording of Daf Zayin base, a correct recording of the Zayin base, because yesterday has too many errors. Okay. So we'll now look at the Mishnah. So we have this whole discussion the Mishnah is because we have mechitza, which is not really a good mechitza, because it's primarily made up. It's a weak mechitza. It's made up of sticks going either from the bottom to the top or across, and it's all dependent on lavud, and you don't have a shesi the error. You have either a shesi or an error. So that's a weak type of mechitza, and it is permitted because of the principle of lavud. We are permitted to have this type of mechitza, but because it's a weak type of mechitza, so therefore the limits of when the chachamim were makel and permitted us to use it. So I'll go back to the middle of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "B'shayora dibru." All these allowances that we're able. This is a Mishnah on Daf Zayin base. All these allowances that we allow for this weaker type of mechitza this is only b'shayora in a caravan. Caravan means a group of people who are traveling together. That's Divri Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chacham say, "L'dibra b'shayora ela b'hei." That they use the Chacham, yes, they use the word Shayara, but when they use the word Shayara, they didn't mean that it has to be a caravan. And if it's one person traveling, same thing. But normally a single person doesn't travel, but so you travel in a caravan. But whenever you're traveling, that's okay, and then and then you can use these weak mechitzas will be sufficient. But that's the first part, and then we have another part of the Mishnah. Kol mechitza she'ena sheshesi ve'erev, eina mechitza divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, he's more strict than his father, and he says that even the shayara, never you can never use a mechitza which is not shesi ve'erev. All mechitzas have to have shesi ve'erev. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chomim say echad mishnei bar. You either need a shesi or an erev. You don't need to worry about having dafka shesi ve'erev. The bottom line is of all this that we're talking about a weak mechitza. Now, in the Gemara basically discussed that even Rabbi Yehuda and even Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who basically is stricter than Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't matter, but both of them who limited the use of the weak mechitzas, even though they limited the use of the weak mechitzas, that is the limitation of the weak mechitzas does not discuss if there is an allowance for each person, which even they agree to, that you can have a weak mechitza. So just to say it over again, that even Rabbi Yehuda and his son, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, even they agree that you can use these. There's a certain allowance when a person is allowed to use these weak mechitzas, and that allowance is based on science. So if whatever Rabbi Yehuda said, that, for instance, Rabbi Yehuda says b'shayara you can use a weak mechitza, but when you're yochid, if you're by yourself, it's less than the shayara. So then you can't use the weak mechitzas. Nevertheless, there is an allowance of a basis sign for each person traveling, and even though it's not a shayara, there's still allowance of basis sign, which then you can use weak mechitzas. It's when you are using more than basis sign, that is when Rabbi Yehuda says no, that's only by shayara. And the same thing applies also, the same thing applies also to Rabbi Yehuda. When he says that you can never have the weak mechitzas. What does it mean, never have your weak mechitzas? Never when it means there is an allowance. There's an allowance of basis sign that you can have a weak mechitzas. When you're going above the basis sign, that is when Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot have the weak mechitzas. So if we're talking about base society, so it's in all situations. In all situations, if it's only base sign per person, it's base sign per person, then you're allowed to have a weak mechitza. Now, and just to mention another thing, usually when we learn about base sign, we were discussing about base sign sheloi hukaf l'dira. If a thing which is not meant for living, if an area which is not meant for living in, and you have mechitzas, so mechitzas make it a reshus hayachid. Nevertheless, if it's larger than base sign, one is not permitted to carry. Even if it has the mechitzas are perfect for reshus hayachid. If it's not hukaf l'dira, it's midrabanan, then you're not allowed to carry that if it's larger than base sign. Here, when we're talking about the weak mechitzas, we're talking about that it is hukaf l'dira, because it is for you to live, because you're staying there Shabbos within the mechitzas. Nevertheless, if you're staying Shabbos within the mechitzas, because it's a weak mechitza, so there's these opinions that you're limited to there's a machlokes and Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and the Chachamim, but when they are limiting you to base a sign, we're talking about even though you're living that. So it's an extra chumrah on the regular when we speak about base a sign shluchah we do in other places in Shas. So even if you're living that, since it's a weak mechitza, you still are limited to this base a sign, and after that you need the shesi, the erev. Just to say that a shayara, 3 people makes up a shayara, a caravan. If it's less than 3, then it's called its individual. Okay, when I said the Mishnah, I said the Mishnah, it looks like there's 3 opinions in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, his son, and the Chachamim, but we will learn further in the Gemara today that there's actually 4 opinions. There is the first Chachamim and the second Chachamim, and right, and this is actually 4 opinions in the Mishnah. And another point so when the Chachamim, just to mention, when the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, so what they are saying is that that if you need to use a larger area than base of sign, you're allowed to use a larger area than base of sign. If you don't need it, for sure. So again, if you're going to have when the Chachamim, when they are more makel, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda, when they make it more lenient, they're making it more lenient that you're allowed to have a larger area only if you are using it. You have so much stuff that it's being spread out over the whole area, whatever it is. If you're using it, but if you're not using it, just leaving it vacant, then they also agree that you can't have more than base sign vacant. If you have base sign, which is a regular one, which you find in other places, Shas. So they also the principle of you can't have a base sign vacant. Then that's they agree with. So like I'm repeating it again, that the only thing is they say that if you are using the area which is larger than base sign for each individual, that's also okay. Whereas Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is limited, even if you do need it, you still can't have more than base sign. Okay. Well, I'll start now from 2 lines down from the page. That's beginning of that sign of Dal. Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav. So Rav Gidl said the name of Rav. Shloisha, 3 people. So b'chomesh asurim. Sometimes the even 5 saw. The base of sign is an area of 2 saw, and the chomesh is an area of 5 saw. So the chomesh is asurim. So 3 people, even an area of 5 saw, they are also they're also to carry. If you fence off such a large area, it's too large, and they will be also to carry. And sometimes the sheva motarim. Sometimes the 3 people, you fence off the larger area, an area of 7 saw, they'll still be mutar. So sometimes even 5 saw is also for 3 people, and sometimes even 7 saw is mutar for 3 people. Right. Amr lei, Amar Rav Hachis, said Rav Gidl, did Rav say such a thing? Amar Luz, he said to Reis in the beer, Uksibid Amar Rav Hachis. It's like I said, the Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim, the Torah, the Rav said like that. It's like a lotion of a shvur. He's saying a shvur, like Ki'ilu is making a shvur by the Torah, and it's a lotion of a shvur. Of course, Rav said like that. Okay. Amar Rav Ashi said, my kasha, what is the difficulty in understanding why Rav said it? And maybe this is the pshat. If they needed these 3 people, so they needed to have 6. The kifa b'sheish, and then he made 1 extra. The one is an extra saw. The area covered an extra area, which is 1 saw. The area 1 saw above of what they need is afilu b'sheva motar. So it's okay. So even though there's 3, and these people actually they only need They only need the 6 saw. That's all they need because the needs are not greater. And they fenced off a larger area. Nicht gefährlich. If it's only 1 saw, base saw extra, it's mutter. You're allowed to carry it. It's good. Lo yuchutzuchu elal chomesh v'kifa b'sheva. If they only needed 5, they didn't need more. They only needed 5, and therefore they're going to have an empty space, a vacant space of 7. So then even 5, they can't use. Even the 5 they can't use because the whole fencing is not kosher fencing, so they can't use it. Why? Because they fenced up an area too large, which has in it 2 vacant besa above what they need, and which is not hook up the deer, so it ruins the whole fence. So the Gemara asks, 1 second, but it doesn't seem to fit in with what we learned in the Mishnah. In the Brises. We learned one of the Brises, because we learned the Brises, it says, the Chachamim, they say you can have larger areas, but there's one thing, but there shouldn't be a base of Sayim which is vacant. My love, what does it mean? Ponu b'Adam, that the Bryce is talking about that each person has an allowance of a base of Sayim. So that means that you have one person which is each person is given an area allowance of base of Sayim. And when it says base of Sayim Ponui, it means that there's a base of Sayim above the number of people. So let's say if you have 8 people, so you have base of Sayim for each one of the 8, and then you made 8 times base of Sayim, and then you made 9 times base of Sayim. 9 times base of Sayim means you have 1 base of Sayim, which there is no person to account for it. So that's the pshat. That's what the Gemara understood the pshat the Brisa. It means that the Gemara understood the Brisa that each person is given an allowance of base Sayim, which that doesn't fit in over here. That we see that if you don't need it, so you're not using it, so the allowance doesn't work. The allowance of base Sayim doesn't work, so it doesn't fit in there. So the Gemara says, the pshat and the Brisa does not mean that every person is the pshat and the chacham of the Brisa is not the pshat that every person has an allowance of base Sayim, and that's how you figure it out. For every person, you have base Sayim. No, it depends on the use, and so therefore it fits in very well with Rab. If you're not using it, if you can have many people you want, but if they're only in a small area and the rest of it they're not living and it's vacant, they're not being used, so then it'll ruin the whole mechitza. Because as long as you have two base Sayim vacant from usage, it doesn't make a difference how many. If you have a lot of people, but if the 2 base Sayim not being used, therefore then the mechitzas are no good because they include an area which is not being used. Okay, now we're going to discuss something else. We learned the Shloisha. We had 3 people. Fine, 3 people. So that you have the 6 base saw or whatever. So you're allowed to have 6 base saw, let's say, if they're using it. So Shloisha mes echad men. Then one of them died. So therefore, what that person is using, all that is not relevant because his dad is not going to be using that area. So now comes out that they have too much area. So that means in the middle of Shabbos, he died in the middle of Shabbos. So in the middle of Shabbos, they're not allowed to carry. Why? Because the person has died, and therefore then now the mechitza is too large for them. Because for the 2 people, they only need a certain amount, and therefore there's base of Sayim, which because he died, and therefore the mechitza is no good. So can they still carry or not? And the same question is in the reverse. If it was when Shabbos came in, it was possible because Shnayim, there was only 2 of them, and they made a big area, and therefore there was some of it was vacant. Then later, on Shabbos, some more people came in there, and therefore we need a bit more area. And so therefore, if you were going on the what the situation is on Shabbos afternoon, On Shabbos afternoon, there's a whole bunch of people there. They need more space, which they're using, and therefore it would be kosher. The mechitzas would be kosher for them. But if you're going to go back to when Shabbos started, there was only 2 people who were living there, and therefore the mechitzas were too big, and therefore they were not kosher. You wouldn't be allowed to carry. So what happens if the change in the usage of the area happened on Shabbos? Do we say we go according to what the status is, the beginning of Shabbos, and the beginning of Shabbos, that's how it stays the whole of Shabbos? Or do we say that it changes according to the usage even in the middle of Shabbos as well? So the Nachloek is Eruvin of Rabbi Yitzchak. One says Shabbos geremes, that what causes the din, where you're permitted to carry or not, is when Shabbos starts. So when Shabbos starts, you're allowed to carry that. That's how the din stays throughout the whole of Shabbos. Chad says the urine goyim. It depends on the people. If there's a need for use, then it's mukha for the diur. If it's mukha for the diur, then you're allowed to carry. But if it's not mukha for the diur, then it's not allowed to carry. And it depends. Right now, if I want to carry now, so do I now have the urine there? Is now the amount? Is the mechitzas now good for the amount of people, or now the mechitzas are not appropriate to the amount of people? That's what depends. It doesn't depend on what happened when Shabbos came in. Okay, the Gemara says this time bring a right that Rabbi who the Omer, Rabbi is the one who said the Shabbos geremes. That it depends what happens at the beginning of Shabbos, and therefore for the whole Shabbos it becomes set at this area you'll have to carry Shabbos. The Omer of the Boimer Rabbi Huna, the Asran Rabbi Huna, Boimer Rabbi Huna was Asran Rabbi Huna. Irev derech haPesach, Nissan haPesach derech. Sorry, Nissan haPesach derech hachaloyin, Nissan derech hachaloyin. So you have if you make you have two chatzeres. Yeah, we have 2 gardens. So we have 2 gardens, and you won't be able to carry from one to the other. So if you have a Pesach, an entrance, or chaloin, a window, so then you can make an eruv. You're saying you make an eruv, the eruv chatzeres, that the 2 chatzeres are really one. You take food, put it in one of the chatzeres, and then both chatzeres belong to both of you, and then therefore both chatzeres belong to everyone. So therefore you're allowed to carry. You're allowed to carry it. Become shutza, and you're allowed to carry chatzeres. But this din of eruv can only be done if you have a proper sized entrance to pass through from one to the other. So therefore, for instance, you have a chaloin. If, for instance, there's a number of dinim, but one of them is if the window is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Okay, so you have such a window between the 2 chatzeres. You have fencing, and in the fencing you have a window of 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Oh, so then that's kosher enough to make an eruv, and you can mix the 2 chatzeres together. But what happens if the window there between the window in the fence is only 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim? That is not good enough to make an eruv. You can't mix the 2 chatzeres and make them like one. Both of them, there's a shutfus. Both chatzeres are one, and it's a shutfus dikachatzer. You cannot do that if the chaloin is, for instance, 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim. It's too small. Now we have and the same thing is done by Pesach as well. So so the shaila is, what happens if the Pesach they made the eruv by good? The Pesach was okay, the chaloin was okay, whatever he did, it was okay and was good enough to make an eruv. What happened Shabbos? The thing fell down and collapsed or whatever, and the kitzur, the chaloin became blocked, the window became blocked, or the Pesach became blocked. Of course, you can still carry through or put things over. You can put things over the mechitza, the flower, whatever. So that chaloin became a block. So are you allowed to? So the chaloin which allowed for the eruv to be made, that became blocked on Shabbos. So is now the din changed? So once you don't have that chaloin, therefore you can't make an eruv, therefore you can't carry. Or do we say since Shabbos, the beginning of Shabbos, both chatzeres were considered like one, and you're allowed to carry from one to the other? So therefore, for the whole Shabbos, the din is not going to change. So they asked So they asked for Rabbi Huna, and they asked for Rabbi Huna, and what? That if it changes Shabbos, so what was the answer, Rabbi Huna? Shabbos hoil v'hutra hutra. Yeah, once it's been established in Shabbos that you're allowed to carry. So that din is going to remain for the whole Shabbos. That is considered a Meshutas Dika Erev. So therefore, this time, so we have a raya that who is the one who says the svara of who is the one that says the svara of that the din is set at the beginning of Shabbos for the whole Shabbos. So it must be Rav Huna, and now we know that Rav Yitzchak is the one that says the Urim Gorimim, and Rav Huna says Shabbos Gorems. Okay. So Gemara says, so we have this machlokes. Lema, let's say Rav Huna, Rav Yitzchak, let's say Rav Huna, Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yosef, Rav Huna, they argue in the same machlokes of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. And in other words, this machlokes, whether the din remains as it was, the status remains as it was from the beginning of Shabbos, or whether it changes with whatever takes place on Shabbos itself, the din will change on Shabbos itself, is the machlokes also of, we find such a machlokes in Rabbi Yossi and it's now we learn in the Mishnah, Chotzer Shnei Put Mishnei Ruchasel, that the Chotzer where the Mechitza got broken, two sides of the Mechitza. The Kitzer, it got broken in such a way that it's not considered a Pesach, etc. So it got broken and both sides, and therefore you can't. That's such a pirza, you're not allowed to carry. You have to fix it before Shabbos. The house which was broken, the wall fell down from two sides. It fell down. The chain also movish nitl karesa lechyav, the movi which you're allowed to carry because it has a kveira of lechi. On Shabbos it fell down or broke to carry the kveira of lechi. So so now the mechitzas, in other words, in all these, there's all cases where the mechitza is not fit to be a mechitza to allow you to carry, and but they happened in the middle of Shabbos. When Shabbos entered, the mechitzas were fit for purpose, and now the mechitzas are not kosher to allow you to carry. So does it did change or not on Shabbos? Or do we go to the beginning of Shabbos? So he says. So that Shabbos, so Rabbi Yehuda says, once you're permitted to carry on Shabbos, the whole Shabbos you're allowed to carry, and next Shabbos, next Shabbos, it's going to be possible, not to carry. Rabbi Yosef says, in the eternal Shabbos, if they're good enough for this Shabbos, they should be good enough for next Shabbos. If they're not good enough for next Shabbos, that's Shabbos. It's not good for this Shabbos. The kids Rabbi Yosef says that basically you're not allowed to carry, because once the chitzas have fallen, so now it doesn't have problem with the shus, doesn't have problem with chitzas, doesn't have problem with chitzas, you're not allowed to carry. So let's say the Omar the Yehuda who says that the one you go according to the status of when Shabbos enters is the whole like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yitzchak the Omar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yitzchak who says that you judge the halacha according to not what happened when Shabbos started, but what's happening at this moment in time when you're carrying. That's what you judge it. If you have proper mechitzas or you don't have proper mechitzas now, and so therefore he holds like Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says that being saying that you go according to the beginning of Shabbos in one of these dinim does not mean you go by the other dinim according to by the other dinim of the beginning of Shabbos. In other words, that one can argue that when it comes to mechitzas, then you can't look. Even they both agree that there is such a principle. You can say that everybody agrees there is such a principle of when Shabbos starts, it's permitted to carry here. So then that din is permitted to carry will stay over the whole of Shabbos. But there But the thing is that even though that principle is a principle which is a correct principle, and everybody will agree with that principle, but there are certain things which override that principle. There are certain changes which will override that principle, and therefore the halacha will change on Shabbos itself. So the question is it, if, for instance, a change in the mechitzah, change in the mechitzahs, does that override that principle or not? So you could argue that the change in mechitzahs is so serious that even though some things, the halacha at the beginning of Shabbos, if he's permitted to carry, so that halacha stays for the whole of Shabbos. But a break, a change in the mechitzahs, that is so fundamental that the halacha will change, even though in the beginning of Shabbos was permitted, because such a fundamental change, you can't say it continues, that the heter continues throughout the Shabbos. Or you can say the other way around. You can say the other way around, that beneged to the amount of people living there. You can say at the end, in principle, yes, we hold that. Even by mechitzas, we hold that. If it was permitted to carry a Shabbos, so that's for this Shabbos, it's considered Rishus HaYochid, and there's no worries, and it's a proper Rishus HaYochid, that it's a fully fledged Rishus HaYochid, and it stays there for the Shabbos. But if all of a sudden there's less people, something fundamental like that it's not being used b'chlal, that is so much so that it overrides this principle which we have, that the din from the beginning of Shabbos should stay throughout the whole Shabbos. So it depends how much weight you put into the change in the mechitzas. It depends how much weight you put into the change, if there's less people or more people. If that is weightier than the principle, each one of them, you can argue each way, and that's what the Gemara is going to say. So the Gemara says, I hold even Rabbi Yossi, that even Rabbi Yossi says that you're not allowed to you're not allowed to carry when the mechitzas get broken. That kind of Rabbi Yossi also the less of mechitzas. Such a serious matter, fundamental matter as mechitzas. So then, of course, that will change. We can't. That will change the status even of Shabbos itself. The mechitzas, the main thing, like mechitzas, is there. The only thing about that is less people. No, for that the principle of we should go according to the beginning of Shabbos is valid. Rabbi Yitzchak will say in a different way. I know the Amir said Rabbi Huda. He says I hold even like Rabbi Huda. I agree with Rabbi Huda that I agree with you. Yes, of course. When it comes to the chitzas, once it's mutter and Shabbos, even though the chitzah broke, but Shabbos, the chitzas is not so fundamental that we should change the din on Shabbos. It's not such a fundamental change. The urim, when you have the amount of people, also less than the urim, the amount of people change. That's such a fundamental change that you cannot continue the same halacha just because at the beginning of Shabbos we can't continue on. Say it's still permitted when you have such a fundamental change as the urim. Okay, as less people or more people actually as well. Okay, the last the Gemara now says so we have twice the Chacham. So the Chacham say that the Echad B'Shnei Dvarim means you don't need to have a Erev and Shesi Erev. It's enough to have, for the Mechitzas, it's enough to have either Shesi or Erev. So the Gemara says, why do we have to mention this opinion? Aina Tanakama. You said Rabbi Huda, then you had Chachamim, and then you have Rabbi Huda. Enough, 3 opinions. So why are you bringing in the Chachamim again? So the Gemara says actually there's 4 opinions over here. Because the opinion, the Chacham itself is 2 opinions. Right. So the first is Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda says that it's only permitted to use these weak mechitzas for a caravan, but for individuals not. And the Chachamim, they extend it. They say even for individuals who are traveling, they can still use this leniency of those weak type of mechitzas. And then Rabbi Yossi comes along and says, even the caravan, you can't use these leniencies. Let's just remember, this is all talking about if it's above a base saw for each person, right? So if it's a baba each person for each person, the there's no way. Even a shayara, there's a whole group of people still who can't override the allowance and to suffer each person, even though they need it, there's no way. Then you have the last chacham. The last chacham, they say b'chlal. It's okay. You can have either Shesi or Erev, as long as you don't have vacant places. Vacant. You have a vacant society, which is vacant, of course. Not everybody knows that society, which is loy hookup with there, which is not for living there. So that doesn't. That's not the midrabanon. It doesn't have the you're not allowed to carry that. But other than that, so even yochid b'yishuv, it's not in the middle of a journey. You have to make it for it. So still, they say either the Shesi or the Erev, one of them is sufficient to be a mechitza. I said as long as there's no two so like I brought 4 things. When you go to battle, there's 4 things which are part of Nevi'im Eitzim Mikol Mokim. You're allowed to steal wood from every place. You need it for the battle. So you're allowed to steal wood. You don't make him close to dime. And with the mai, you don't have to worry about the mai. Mai is food which you buy from Amhoretz, and you don't know whether they took trumas from it. And they don't have to make Eruvin. So if you have, for instance, they made 2 mechitzas, and they had 2 camps with mechitzas, so they had to make 2 groups, and they made a mechitza, and then they want to carry from one mechitza from one to the other, which is like from one Rosh Hashanah to another Rosh Hashanah, which is next to it. So you don't have to make the Eruv. You don't have to make the Eruv Chetzeres. They have 2 groups, and they have each one has the mechitza around it, and they have a common fence. So to carry from one to the other, you need the Eruv. But if it's in the Chama, then you don't need it. Okay, Tan Rabbanan will learn. Machna Yitzis in the Chama, or Shuz, the machna which goes out from the chometz or shus, but it's not a chemes mitzvah. Chemes mitzvah is to capture as a struggle. It's a chemes or shus, other chometz. So motorim the motorim the gazel eitzim yevation. You're allowed to, even for that, right, you have the melchama, you're allowed to steal dry wood. And certainly branches and all that stuff which is wet. It's sure you're allowed to steal. Like even dry wood, which it's been carved and put away. The guy has put away wood. He wants to build himself a bungalow or whatever it is. It's dried, and so even that you're allowed to steal. The Buddha says you can even camp wherever you want, even somebody else's property. You can camp there. Also, that the place where they get killed, so you can be mekaber them, you can bury them over there, and you don't have to, even though it's somebody else's property, and you don't have to move them somewhere else. So the Gemara says, they're allowed to steal dry wood. The Gemara says this is not to new dinim. This is part of the old takanas of Yeshua. High takanah Yeshua. That's the part of the list of the takanas Yeshua made when he came to Eretz Yisrael. So he made 10 tnoim when he came into Eretz Yisrael, and shiyu marin b'choshen, that you're allowed to the animals allowed to pasture in the forest. So let's say I have a forest area. If I have a forest area, you're allowed to have your animals pasture there. If I have a place where farmland, of course, you eat up all my crops and everything. Of course, you're not allowed to. That's shamvirego. Yeah. But if I have a forest area, so that was at night, you have a forest area, so they're allowed to pasture. They're not going to eat up the trees. They'll play, so whatever. So I guess they're allowed to. They'll have a few leaves, but and they're allowed to also take wood from the fields. So you have fields, and then there's some wood over there in the field. So you're allowed to take wood if you need it, whatever you need it for. You're allowed to take the wood from somebody else's field. So that's very part of Yeshua. You're allowed to take the wood from somebody else's field, not to chop down his forest, but when it's a soda, it's a field. So then you're allowed to take some wood there. So the Gemara says, there we're talking about thorn. So if it's we're talking about the woods, you're allowed to take. So you're talking about thorns. So the owner could argue that it's my field and there's thorns there growing. I want to for me, can't take it. So the Yeshua made it now you're allowed to take it. This is talking about regular wood. That's mechuber. It's still mechuber to the ground. It's here we're talking about proper wood, cut off and set aside. It's already. It's not just the growing. Inami also the lachem hagam. Well, here the chiddush is at time of battle. The time we sure was only lachem. It's soft. It's not. If you take the wood, you made it. You've dried them out, and it's stop stealing my wood. This is wood which is going to be used. There's no, you shouldn't make such a tie. It's the wood which is going to be used. You'll have to take somebody else's wood. But here, when it comes to time of battle, you'll have to use the innovation. Okay. So that you can camp whenever you want, and also the person dies, he gets buried with that. So the Gemara says, basically, when the person dies in the battle, mes mitzvah, the mes mitzvah dinner is the mes mitzvah where he dies, so that's the place he can get buried. You don't have to take him anyway. He has the right to be buried with everything. The Gemara says, so he died in the battle, mes mitzvah. So what did the mission need to tell us? The Gemara says, he is late even though there's other people that are going to bury him, he has people to look after him. So that it's not technically considered a mes mitzvah because there are people who would, the family, etc., who would look after him, and they're there. Nevertheless, they can leave him over there.